Yes, could you ask Mr. Harrison to come in, please? All right, Mr. Harrison.
Yes, thank you.
Ready to carry on?
Yeah.
Ms. Harrison, thank you. Before we leave CU8, as it were, what did you take from the absence of response from Group Manager Welsh and two other station managers to your expression of opinion?
It's hard to take anything, to be fair. I knew that I'd impressed upon him. That was my view. I knew that the incident commander, at any incident, has got an awful lot to consider, and at this incident, that was off the scale with the amount of things I had to consider, but I knew that my opinion was at the forefront of his mind when he would come to formulate his plan.
And how did you know it would be at the forefront of his mind?
Due to the way that I delivered the statement, it was impossible not to have heard it.
Okay. And having said your piece, you went to the computer, which
Yes.
was nearby, and then you were tasked with FSG duties.
I was.
Yep. And how long after going to the computer were you tasked with FSG duties?
15 seconds.
Who tasked you with FSG duties?
As I said earlier, I believe someone used my first name. I think it was Mark Kentfield, but it was as a result of an instruction from the group manager.
Okay. Now, Station Manager Egan said in evidence that when he arrived at CU8, and we have a status 3 time for him, I think it's 0158, you were already recording FSG information on a whiteboard. Does that sound right to you?
I didn't record any FSG information on a whiteboard on CU8.
Thank you. At any time during the
At
evening?
any time.
Did you see anyone marking any boards in CU8 whilst you were in there?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. Could I ask you to look at a photograph of a laminated sheet? And Paul, could you bring up MET 000015930? Do you remember seeing this at all at any stage in the evening?
Yes.
And where did you see it?
I saw it on CU7 because I wrote it.
And this was, were you recording the information in CU7 as opposed to CU8?
The information that's on there was transcribed from, I think, approximately 30 pieces of paper that Station Manager Egan had brought with him from CU8 to CU7. And this was the way that he wanted me to record the information from the casualty intimation forms. We would normally put it on a casualty poster, but because of the number, on the casualty poster there's only 7 slots. But I think there's probably around 30 different forms. He had already identified that the casualty poster that we normally use would not be sufficient to handle that sort of information. So as I recall, and I recall it quite well, this was the original 30 pieces of paper that he had taken with him from CU8.
And what flows from that evidence, and just so people have a reference, it's at page 4 of your witness statement, the 3rd paragraph. Do you remember who gave those pieces of paper to Station Manager Egan? Did you see that?
No.
No. Do you know who had been recording the information on the pieces of paper that were then given to Station Manager Egan? It
was definitely recorded on CU8, so the only people that were there were my CU colleagues, Tony Peckham and Dan Merrick, so it would have been one or both of them.
And do you remember what form the information was in? Was it in the control information forms or was it on plain sheets?
It was control information form.
Now, once you're on CU7, you say, this is page 4 of your witness statement and 4 lines from the bottom of that page, that you were joined by Group Manager Goodall. Do you remember how long you'd been on CU7 when Group Manager Goodall arrived?
I didn't think it was very long, and my recollection is that almost as soon as I'd finished writing that list you just had up on the screen, Group Manager Goodall appeared, and he realised that wouldn't work, and he asked me to draw a grid.
No. So 5-10 minutes?
No more than 10 minutes,
Okay.
maximum.
Now, you explain, as you just said, the Group Manager Goodall asked you to draw a grid of the tower on the board to record the FSG information. The Group Manager, when he gave evidence, said that initially you were just listing the flats on the board.
Yes.
You weren't operating the grid system immediately on CU7. Again, that seems to be consistent with your recollection.
That's correct, yes.
And do you think that the laminated sheet that we've just looked at, and we can look at again if that helps, could have been what you were initially using on CU7 as well?
No.
No. Okay. And it certainly wasn't brought over from CU8, in your view?
No, it wasn't.
Okay. Paul, could you bring up MET 000-15924? I'll just let you look at that photograph, Mr. Harrison. Do you recall seeing this board at any stage in the evening?
Yes, I drew this board.
And again, is this the grid system that the Group Manager Goodall directed you
yes.
to compile? Now, we're trying to fix a time at which you started to compile the grid system. You arrived at 1:42. How long after arrival do you think you started compiling the grid system?
The time is quite difficult to pin down with any great degree of accuracy, but that grid would have been drawn within 10 minutes of me arriving on CU7. I would suggest around 2:15 in the morning.
Could I ask Paul to bring up a document MET 000-15934? Now, if Paul is able to focus on the board at the far right of that photograph. Now, at first blush, that looks like the start of the grid system, Mr. Harrison.
Yes.
And we have a timestamp of that photo for 0300 hours. Does that help you at all with the time when you started to compile the grid system, if I can call it that?
That's quite surprising to me, to be fair. I thought we'd started to use that grid system a lot earlier than that. I'm not sure who took this photograph.
I'm not
where the
sure.
timestamp comes from.
Yeah. We know it's time-stamped 0300 hours, but you think it was earlier is your evidence?
That's my memory.
Okay. Now, you were populating the grid with information, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you were holding the pen?
Yes, most of the time.
Yeah. And who else, when you weren't doing it, who else was?
It would have been possibly Dan Merrick or Tony Peckham.
Now, could I ask Paul to bring up another photograph, and that's MET 000-15927. Now, in the right-hand corner of that photograph is a floor plaque. Do you remember seeing this on CU7 at all?
Yes.
Yes. Do you know who got hold of it?
I think I brought it from CU8. Do you want to know who got it from the tower?
If you know.
Yeah, I believe it's Mark Kentfield.
Okay. And did you use the information on that floor plaque when putting your grid together?
Yes, if I didn't have that, the grid would have been inaccurate.
And at this point, who was taking information from control?
The way it was set up, my two colleagues, Tony Peckham and Dan Merrick, were taking information from control. They would announce it to me and then back it up with the casualty information form. I would populate the grid, and Station Manager Egan was behind me looking at the grid and forwarding that information to the bridgehead.
Okay. And were they at any stage handing over slips of paper to you?
Yes. As I said, they took the information, they would verbally call it out, I would have it on the board, then they would back it up with the actual form itself.
Okay, so the initial call then confirmed with the piece of
Yes.
paper. Would you verify the contents of the slip to ensure that it accorded with the verbal
Yes.
call? Now, in relation to how the FSG information reached the incident ground, you say at paragraph 5 of your statement, and it's the top line, that Station Manager Egan was passing the information over to another colleague at the bridgehead. Now, we think that that direct line of communication between Mr. Egan and Mr. Wolfenden at the bridgehead was set up around 4 a.m. Now, do you know how FSG information was being passed from CU7 to the incident ground before 4 o'clock?
My assumption was that it was going to the bridgehead all the way throughout the incident. I didn't know at any point it wasn't going to the bridgehead.
Okay. Did you know how the information was communicated? Runners, radio?
We used a mixture. I was aware of runners coming onto the unit, and also Station Manager Egan was on his, certainly on the handheld radio, and possibly on his mobile phone as well.
Okay. And you may have heard some discussion through the course of the evidence as to whether relying upon runners was more efficient than relying upon radio. Do you have a view as to the competing efficiencies of those two means of communication?
I think that it would be quicker normally to use the radio and or a telephone. If for whatever reason that's not working, you have to fall back to a runner.
So if, for example, the radio channels are congested, then a runner would be a practical
alternative. If that's the only way we can do it, we have to do whatever we can to get the information through.
Could I jump slightly ahead in your witness statement to page 7, and it's the third line down. And you refer there to feedback that you were getting from the incident ground. And you say that, and I quote, "When people came out, especially from the lower floors, we received feedback from the crews informing us how many people had been rescued, and we marked it on the board." Now, how much feedback would you say you were receiving in relation to FSGs?
A lot less than we would have wanted to. And it was painfully slow. But that was a testament to how difficult the conditions were inside the tower. It didn't come as a surprise to us, considering we could see the tower on fire from our unit. So it wasn't a surprise.
Can you give us an idea of what was coming back to you? What type of information was coming back to you?
It was literally, and I only remember it from the lower floors. And again, we put it on a grid. When we did have the information, it would be gone to whatever flat it was, and people rescued or evacuated or not there. And then we would put an indicator on the grid that there was no one left in that flat anymore.
Were you given precise numbers?
In some cases, yes.
But not in all?
No.
Okay. And how is this feedback reaching you? Was it via a combination of runners plus radio, or just runners, just radio?
I can't recall.
Would you get some information from crews coming directly to your command unit?
No.
Apologies, could I jump ahead again in your witness statement, this time to page 9, and it's the third paragraph from the top. And you say that you think at around 0400 hours, Group Manager Goodall informed you that a decision had been made to stop committing firefighters above the 12th floor. Do you remember hearing of any other decisions made by the bridgehead not to commit above a particular floor?
Yes, I think that Station Manager Wolfenden communicated with us a couple of times and asked us to record when people were not being committed above certain floors, and I believe it was me that wrote that on a whiteboard.
And again, would he communicate, would it be done via runner, or would he communicate directly via radio?
I can't pin that down exactly, I can't remember.
Do you remember anything particular about the 15th floor, for example? Any message in that regard?
I think that was one of the ones that Pete Wolfenden had passed over to us. I remember it was green writing on the board, and there was two particular timings, and they were both after 4 in the morning, and I've got a feeling they're about 15 or 20 minutes apart.
Thank you. Finally, do you remember what Watch Manager Kentfield was doing whilst you were working on CU7?
No, he was the team leader from the main incident command unit. Periodically, he would come into our command unit to check on progress. But I've no idea, other than that, what he was doing.
So, okay. Do you know whether he had any involvement in those dealing with FSGs? Are you able to assist us?
Not at this point, no.
Okay. Can I move on to a separate topic, certain technical issues that arise? Can I apologise again, going back in your witness statement, this time to page 5, and it's the first long paragraph on that page, and 7 lines up from the bottom. You refer there to trying unsuccessfully to get a link from the police heli-tele when you heard reports that there were people on the roof. Do you remember roughly what time this was?
Well, the heli-tele I actually tried as soon as I got on the command unit. It's what we do normally anyway. There was no link. Normally it's on channel 5. I scrolled through up and down through the channels. There's 16 of them, and when the helicopter's up, it automatically would link. The helicopter was definitely up because we could hear it clattering overhead all night long, but there was no connection.
And that remained the case throughout the night?
All the way through. As I said, I tried it as soon as I got on the command unit, and I know Group Manager Goodall tried it as well later on, and then at this juncture, when we had reports of people on the roof, I attempted it again, but there was no heli-tele pictures whatsoever at any stage.
Can you remember how often thereafter you tried to get a link through to them?
I would say that I tried it twice initially and at this point, and Group Manager Goodall had tried it prior to this as well. So that was 3 times that we tried.
And did you mention the difficulties or the failure to get through to, say, Group Manager Goodall?
Group Manager Goodall had tried himself, and at one point he tried to relocate the unit. There's a number of reasons why heli-tele doesn't connect, all of which, well, some of which may have applied on the night. If you're parked under a tree, we were parked under a tree. If you're close to high buildings, we were close to high buildings. If you don't have direct line of sight, we didn't always have direct line of sight with a helicopter. If it's encrypted, or if you're on the wrong channel. We tried the wrong channel scenario, went through all of them, so it had to be one of the other 4 reasons for it not connecting.
Thank you. Now, you also say at page 5, in the first paragraph, and it's 5 lines from the bottom, that you also tried to get access to the BBC or Sky News, but the LFB had cut the connection due to a previous virus attack. Can you explain how having access to news channels would have helped you?
Yes, again, at this point, because we were getting reports of people on the roof of the building, we needed to confirm, or otherwise, if that was the case. If we had had access to the internet and could have accessed either of those news channels, quite often they have helicopters up and they will stream pictures. We could have accessed the pictures on screen and possibly made an assessment as to whether or not there were people on the roof.
Okay. You also say, and this is at page 6 of your witness statement, the second paragraph, second line, that whilst you're on the command unit, the onboard generator failed about 3 times. Can you explain the effect that the 3-time failure of the generator had on your activities?
The onboard generator provides electricity supply for the lighting, the radios and the computers. It had been a known fault for a number of months. I believe that the actual generator on our command unit had been changed twice in the previous 2 years, but it still consistently failed. When it failed, you get a 2-hour battery backup, UPS batteries, uninterruptible power supply. So the generator itself failing won't be an issue, but 2 hours down the line, when you run out of power, it will be an issue. When it did fail, I said to the group manager, I'd warned him in advance it was likely to happen. I also told him that we would have a 2-hour battery backup, but when it did fail, to conserve some of the power, we shut down the computers and we shut down half of the lights so we could preserve battery power for the more essential things such as the radios and maintain some lighting.
Okay. And how long did the battery last for? Did it last the 2 hours?
Well, after an hour, we turned the generator on again, so it started to work again for about an hour. That charged the battery up again, but it failed 3 times, and eventually, after I'd left the command unit, the crew that took over, they told me that the generator failed and the power all ran out of the batteries as well.
Okay, so what effect did these issues have, though, on your ability to carry out your job?
None at the time, but it was a concern, always at the back of our mind. I know that Group Manager Goodall was preparing for the worst, that we would have to get another command unit into situ to carry on the FSG task, and that would be very, very difficult because of the congestion in the streets around the tower.
Was the problem with the generator a problem particular to that individual command unit, or is it a more generic problem with generators that are used on the command units?
I believe it is fairly widely known across all of the command units.
And how can you remember how long this has been a problem, at least known to the staff who operate CUs?
4 years.
And,
at
and,
least.
and have you raised it with those further
Yeah,
up the chain of
I've sent
command?
it up as a defect, and that's how I know that we've had ours changed on 2 occasions, and I suspect that across other units it's been changed as well.
Okay. There are a few other questions I have for you, Mr. Harrison, and apologies for going back to the CU8, where you expressed your views, and you were having an exchange also with Mr. Delaney. Now, I hope I remember it fairly that he informed you that there was only one stairwell. Now, once he'd given you that information, how did you factor that into your assessment of the practicability and the risks arising from an evacuation of the tower, whether total or partial?
I knew it's going to be an extremely difficult task to achieve. And there would be no easy way of achieving it.
And what would be, to your mind, and bearing in mind your experience, what would be the particularly significant difficulties confronting evacuation?
Because the staircase is full of smoke, the residents, as they try to evacuate from their flats, will be exposed to an irrespirable atmosphere as they come down the stairs.
Final question for now, Mr. Harrison. In your second contemporaneous note, and I don't know whether Paul can get that on the screen, and it's the Met allocated page number 6, which is internal page 4. Met page 6, so you need to go on 2 pages. Internal 4. And I think it's something like 6 lines from the top. You refer there that about 0630 I was spotting a man seen waving from a towel at a window of the building, and he was reported to be on the 8th, 9th, 10th and 11th floors. Are you aware what the source of that information was? Did it come from a member of the public? Did it come via control, or did you just see it?
I believe the original report was as a result of someone viewing it on TV at home, and they said, someone phoned someone on our command unit and said, have you seen there is a man waving a towel at a window?
And did you have any further particular information about the gentleman? Any vulnerabilities or any particular evidence as to where precisely he was in the tower?
No.
Okay. And do you know what was done with the information once it had been communicated to you?
Station Manager Egan took strenuous efforts to establish where exactly he was. He may even have left the unit to go and physically look. But this is another example. If we'd had the internet working and could have accessed the TV pictures, we may have been able to get the answer ourselves without having Station Manager Egan having to take extra efforts to try and find it out. I think that Station Manager Egan did establish where he was and ensured that a crew was committed to the correct floor and the man was rescued.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison, those are all the questions I've got for now. So might I ask for the usual 5 minutes so I can see whether there are any further lines which ought to be covered?
Yes. Well, it's convenient now to have a 5-minute break, so Council can check the questions. So if you'd like to go to the usher, don't talk to anyone about your evidence, and we'll be back at 2:30, please. Right, 2:30 then, please.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, a few more questions.
So yes, if only for the sake of consistency.
Yes. Yes, please. Okay. All right, Mr. Harrison?
Yes, thank you.
I think just a few more questions, I suspect. Yes.
Mr. Harrison, thank you very much. First of all, in respect of the heli-telly itself, are you aware that you could have established a direct radio channel to the heli-telly? Are you aware of Echo Sierra 3?
I've never heard of that before. No.
Could I ask Paul to bring up LFB document 2351 _0001? I'll just let you read that. It's a transcript of a call. I'll just let you read it. On its face, that appears to suggest a direct channel to the heli-telly. Are you aware of that?
I wasn't aware of this message, or that we could actually go on to Plom Echo Sierra 3.
Thank you. Final question, Mr. Harrison. Was the viability of using helicopters to effect rescues discussed in CU7?
It was not in CU7. I think it was on outside. When one of the senior officers, and I can't remember which, it was either the incident commander or the operations commander, came round hunting for the information about whether or not there was anyone on the roof who wanted confirmation. A discussion was then undertaken as to, if there were people up there, how could we get them off?
And you say this conversation was outside CU7?
I believe so, yes.
And were you within CU7 and overheard it, or at that stage were you outside CU7?
I think I was at the door. I've got a feeling, and it is quite a hazy memory. Group Manager Goodall, possibly Station Manager Wolfenden was there, and I do vividly remember, I don't know who said it, but the mention of possibly the Coast Guard providing a helicopter, or contacts being made with RAF Northolt to see if they had any helicopters that could be used.
Did the exchange reach a conclusion as to the viability of helicopter use?
No, again, the negatives of possibly using it in a well-ventilated fire, if you get a downdraft from a helicopter, it could turn a fire into a blowtorch. So had there been people still alive in the building who weren't on the roof, but were actually trapped in flats, it could have turned what was already a very, very severe fire literally into a blowtorch.
Mr. Harrison, those are all the questions I've got for you. Thank you very much for attending today to give evidence. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Harrison, for coming to give us your evidence. It's really valuable to us to hear in detail what was going on that evening in different aspects of the work. And so your evidence will contribute to that. Thank you very much indeed.
If I may,
yes?
Could I offer my condolences to the family and friends of all the victims of the tragedy.
Yeah.
And I hope you get the justice you deserve.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
you
you,
go
Mr.
to the usher now. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Kinnear.
So that concludes today's business.
Right.
So tomorrow we have Mr. Walton attending to give evidence.
Yes.
There is no application for an early start, so I'd ask you to sit at 10 o'clock.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Well, we come to an end today rather earlier than we would normally expect to. That may be welcome in some quarters, I don't know. I'm sure you can use the time effectively. And we'll sit again tomorrow at 10 o'clock then, please. Thanks. All right. 10 o'clock tomorrow, please. Thank you.